Hey guys, it's Greg from BitGoblin again, and today we're going to talk about how to plan a PC build. We'll be touching on things like what to look for and where to focus your budget when shopping for parts. And though you may already have an idea of what goes into a PC with a processor, GPU, etc., and how to assemble them together to actually build the PC, it's also important to know how to get there in the first place since, well, you can't build a PC without actually buying the parts and having them on hand. And unfortunately, it's not as simple as just buying the best part for each category since there are tons of options. So to do this, even though I've already selected all the parts for the build, I'm going to show you all the process that I went through to select the parts for my new NAS, to store my video project files and get them off of my other NAS. And while it may not be as applicable to every one of you out there like a gaming PC would be, but for the most part, the process of actually planning the build is the same, just with some minor differences in where you focus your budget, and maybe some different hardware.
You smell that? It smells like a bit goblin.
Just FYI, we're not going to be going over whether you should build a PC or buy a pre-built today, as I want to keep this video somewhat concise, and I've already touched on that topic in a previous video, so if you want, you can go check that out by clicking on the suggested video card up in the top right corner. So the first thing that you need to think about when planning a PC build is what is the purpose of the build, since that will just determine how much of your budget you need to focus on which parts. For example, in a gaming PC, the graphics card is the main thing that determines performance, so you'd want to focus a significant chunk of your budget on that, and then another smaller chunk on the CPU just to keep up with it. But like I said in the intro, we'll be looking at building a NAS today with Unraid as the operating system, which dictates a few things to us. NASs don't really require that powerful of hardware, and you just really need whatever your budget will allow to get up and running. Though this will change if you do plan on running services like Jellyfin or Nextcloud off of your NAS, but we're not going to touch on that today. We also don't need a GPU since we're not gaming or whatever, and that's a great thing to avoid right now if possible since, well, you know, chip shortage and scalpers and all that crap. Unraid requires a flash drive to boot the OS, and lastly, we want to get as much storage as possible into this build since it's, well, going to be storing large video files. Now that that's out of the way, at this point, you'll need to decide exactly what your budget is. Do you have a hard set limit, or are you just looking for the best deals possible to build the system you want as cheaply as possible? For this NAS, I would like to keep my budget to under $500, though for the amount of storage I want to put in it, I know it's likely going to be a little over $500, since 4TB NAS drives are still around $100 each, and building a PC even without a GPU for $300 is a little tough these days. The math is also going to be a little bit weird since I already have some of the parts on hand like the processor, but we'll touch on that later on. So now let's get into the nitty-gritty stuff. What parts should you buy? Any build will require a processor, motherboard, some amount of RAM, optionally a GPU if you're gaming with the PC or have a need for it like video editing, some sort of storage like an SSD or hard drive, a decent enough power supply, and likely a case, even though strictly speaking this isn't exactly required. So now it's shopping time. What we're going to do is I'm going to be shopping on Newegg since I'm kind of used to the site and prefer to do my shopping on a single site, you know, to save on shipping costs and stuff. You could do this, and I would actually strongly encourage this on PCPartPicker.com since it'll help you get the best prices you can on your parts, and it'll also have alerts if your parts may have incompatibilities, which is really useful. Also, in my opinion, PC Part Picker can be a little bit too information dense, just having a ton of different processors that may or may not be applicable, so kind of having it a little bit more of a concise, curated offering is a little nicer, in my opinion, but, you know, to each their own. So the first PC component we'll be going over is the operating system, and the reason we start with this is because you need to plan your hardware support around it. For example, if you're going to be running Linux or FreeBSD, you might want to consider going with an AMD GPU since their drivers are open source and tend to be a little bit easier to get set up on those systems. Now, if you're an experienced PC builder, you might be like, oh, I know this one. You just go to Newegg, you type in Windows 10, you hit enter, then you go click on the listing and go buy. No, bad PC builder. Go take a time out in the corner. No, I'm just playing with you. You would buy Windows 10 in a lot of cases, whether you're buying a gaming PC or just like a general web browsing PC. But like I mentioned earlier, we're going with Unraid, which you don't actually buy on Newegg. It's a separate whole thing. And thankfully, this doesn't restrict us too much in terms of hardware. However, the main thing we need to look at later on is to get a USB flash drive to boot off of, since that's what Unraid requires to install and boot. Now moving on to the actual hardware, we'll start with the CPU. Because we're building a NAS, we don't really need a powerful processor. Anything that will run the OS, the web UI, and can keep up with parity calculations will do just fine. Thankfully, this decision was kind of made easy for me since I already have an AMD Athlon 3000G on hand. The processor's not in the box, it's on my test bench, don't worry about it. But I'm not really using it, and it fits the bill for just powerful enough. But just to kind of show you through the process, let's browse for some CPUs on Newegg. So what we'll do is just go up to the main menu for Newegg. We'll go to components, processors, and then desktop processors. And like I said, we don't really need a super powerful processor. One of the budget ones will do just fine. So we'll just go down here under the series and then check Intel Core i3 and then AMD Ryzen 3. So yeah, the first result we have here is a Core i3 10105. Okay, I hate these names. 10105 processor by Intel for 145. We have the 10100F for 120. Ryzen 3 1200 for 116. That's looking like the best deal so far since we don't really need, again, we don't need a whole lot of cores. We don't really need super fast cores, so this would do it just fine so far. 150 for a 10100. So far what's looking like our best deal so far is that Ryzen 3 1200 for 115, 116. We do see a couple chips down here for under $60, but these are 4th gen Intel Haswell chips. But again, since we're looking at a server that's running 24/7, an older chip has significantly worse performance per watt. So I'm still kind of liking the Ryzen 3 1200 so far. Yeah, so yeah, we're just seeing a bunch of older chips and a lot more expensive chips than we really need. Now, one thing here, since I do know about the AMD Athlon 3000G, which is what I have on hand again, we could just search directly for that. And right here we see that going for $90. While I wouldn't recommend the Athlon 3000G for every build, this is kind of the best bang for the buck right now for a build like this. I will also mention that I also got this on eBay a while ago for around $75 or so, including shipping. So my math will be a little bit lower than if you were to do this build with this chip, but yeah, so keep that in mind. All right, so now that we have our CPU, we're going with the AMD Athlon 3000G if it wasn't obvious. We need to find a compatible motherboard, which means it has an AMD motherboard with an AM4 socket. Thankfully, we really don't need much. We really just need a board that will support the CPU and has at least a couple SATA ports to get started. Usually MATX boards are my go-to for cheap boards since they're really not as popular as like the larger, huge expandability ATX boards, and the mini ITX are usually sought after for like super small compact builds. So what we'll just do here is go back up to that menu, components, motherboards, and then AMD motherboards. Narrow it down to AM4 socket. We'll worry about the chipset later. Go to micro ATX form factor. A lot of the boards here are somewhere around 100, and there are even a couple that are around $50, $60. Okay, I'm back. I had help with groceries, but anyways, so I did some scouting ahead on the motherboards, and there are several that kind of fit in the price range, but I actually had a correction for something I said earlier. So pretty much any of the AM4 motherboards will support the AMD Athlon chip, except for the latest 500 series chipsets. Because if you look over here, for example, on this ASRock B550M-HDV motherboard, great name, you can see like, oh, it supports Ryzen 3000, 4000, and 5000 series processors. The little star is referring to this little not compatible with AMD Athlon processors. And as far as I'm aware, it also includes not supporting the Ryzen 3200G and 3400G. So yeah, so we have to avoid 500 series chipsets. So that kind of narrows down our choices a little bit, which leaves us with this ASRock one for 60, which is the one I picked out earlier. I'm going to avoid the older A320 chipsets because we also have this Asus one for $80. There was an MSI one, I believe, for like around 80 or 60 or something like that. Here we go. So between this board and the ASRock B450 board and then the Asus B450 board, I'm tempted to go with either the first two just because they're about $20 cheaper. While this ASRock one does have a 3A grading, because Newegg, if you go to the review section, a lot of the reviews seem kind of more like user error, like older issues, like it shipped with like an older BIOS and like you can update that pretty easily. Bad VRMs, we're not really going to be overclocking it, so it's not going to be too much of an issue. Dead twice, I mean, that sometimes that just happens. In terms of like the MSI Pro, 4 eggs. I haven't seen any reviews yet that are below 4. Oh, here's one that's complaining about it being DOA, but that just happens. It makes you wonder, but if it happens like once here and there, and it seems like overall it seems pretty good. Another DOA one. So even though I originally spec'd out this ASRock board, I might actually go with the MSI board. Just the reviews do seem a little bit better in comparison, and the price is like $1 difference. All right, I'm gonna go with my gut here since I already spec'd it out with the ASRock one. I'm gonna go with this one. At this point, it's really just a coin flip between the two boards, and you know, I'm just gonna go with what I've already spec'd out. So let's just add that to our list. Okay, so now that we have our motherboard selected, we need to look at the RAM. And just like the motherboard, we really don't need too much for the system. We just need something that's compatible with our parts so far. And to do that, we'll just go back to the main menu, components, memory, and then desktop memory. So since we're using Unraid as our base OS, we really don't need too much RAM. So while it's a lot more than we're going to need for the system, the best bang for your buck is going to be 16 gigabyte kits of DDR4 RAM. As you'll see right here, we can get kits as low as like $62 for 16 gigs of RAM, $63, $65 for pretty much the same thing, just a different color. And of course, you can go up a lot more if you want to go for higher speeds or whatever. But even still, for 3200 megahertz RAM, $65, even $63, $62. You know, that's a wait. This is 3600. Okay, we're gonna check that out. What I had spec'd out was this $65 kit for 3200 megahertz RAM. We're kind of splitting hairs here because we're not really going to need super fast RAM anyway for Unraid. So I guess we're going to go with that Corsair RAM. Since we're only talking about a $2 difference, this is more of just going with my gut here. And you know what's interesting? Normally you would like, oh, you know, if you want to get a cheaper kit of RAM, you would just go down to 8 gigabytes. Nope. 8 gigabyte, 2 4 gigabyte sticks is about $100. So that's very interesting that literally the cheapest kit here would be $65 for 16 gigs. That's fun. So now let's talk about storage. For this system, it's going to be twofold, kinda. We need a boot drive and some hard drives for mass storage. Since we're using Unraid for the OS, we actually need to spec in a USB flash drive for the boot drive, like I mentioned earlier, since it will only boot off of a flash drive. I hate this. I would much prefer something a bit more professional level, like booting off of an SSD or something, but we're rolling with it. I have a few of these old 16 gigabyte SanDisk USB drives just sitting around that really aren't doing anything, so these will do just fine. A new one of these on Newegg, I believe, is about $8. We'll just check really quick. Boom. That exact model, or maybe a newer model. Anyways, that flash drive is $8 on Newegg. And I'm sure you can find a cheaper one, but we're only talking maybe like a few dollars worth of savings. So pricing wise, I'm not too concerned, and I'm not going to buy another one when I have these lying around. Now for the hard drives, since my video share is currently using about 2.2 to 2.3 terabytes of storage currently, I'm going to be looking for 2 4 terabyte hard drives. That way when it's all set up, I'll have one storage drive and one parity drive set up in Unraid, and give me a total of 4 terabytes of space for now and about 1.5 terabytes or so to use. If I was using FreeNAS, I would need to spec out another drive or two right now with a drive expansion bay for the case I'm going to use, which yes, I've already pre-selected, since it's not exactly straightforward or easy to expand a ZFS volume. But since I'm using Unraid, when I have some spare money lying around or can get another drive as a holiday gift or whatever, I can easily just pop in a new drive and expand the array. Typically, I lean towards either Seagate Ironwolf drive or a WD Red drive. So let's just go ahead and type in NAS hard drive, see what comes up. And let's narrow this down to 4 terabyte capacity. There we go. We have Seagate Ironwolf. Guess Newegg doesn't sell WD. That's interesting. So the Ironwolf 4 terabyte NAS hard drive is going for $90 currently on Newegg. That's actually cheaper than when I spec'd it out. So that's good to see. About $10 off. For comparison, let's head over to Amazon really quick and see how much a WD Red is. So over here on Amazon, we could see that WD Reds are currently going for, oh, that's SMR, $80, but SMR drive. One thing to look out for with these higher capacity drives is SMR versus CMR. There's a whole long story behind WD misclassifying SMR drives or not disclosing it easily, but we want to be shooting for CMR drives for the NAS, and a WD Red Plus, I guess is what they're calling that. is going for 85. So maybe we'll go with that. $5 off for 2 drives, saving $10. So let's just add that to our list too. And just for the record, these Seagate Iron Wolf NAS drives are CMR, as you can see in the name right here. So for the case, I kind of already had a case in mind when I was kind of planning this build, and actually was kind of the inspiring factor for the build. I've been aware of this case for a while, for several years now, and I've really wanted to find a use for it since I really liked it. I thought it was really cool, like a nice little form factor for a case. But just to do some due diligence, let's go ahead and shop around for a case like normally. So we could just go, searching for ATX cases, but let's kind of narrow this down a little bit to a NAS case, since that'll kind of get us pointed in the right direction of the case with hot swap bays in the front and some other like niceties that are nice to have on a NAS. So we can see some like RAID enclosures, which is like, okay. There's this no-name 4-bay NAS chassis. Let's kind of see what this is. Oh, it's a mini ITX chassis. Okay, that's not going to work because we need one that supports at least M-ATX boards. Ooh, so yeah, so we see a few more like, well, that's like a whole server rack. Okay, that's fun stuff. Yeah, we see like some like larger cases, I guess. We have this Silverstone case for 212. Another RAID enclosure. Think another rating, yeah, hard drive enclosure. Here's the case that I've already selected. It's a Cooler Master HAF, Evo, I think it's called. Yeah, Cooler Master HAS XB Evo. It's kind of intended to be more like a media center PC. Have a couple hot swap bays in the front for hard drives, 2 5.25-inch bays, which I'll be using to add more hot swap bays down the road. It's just like nice and compact and can make this into like a nice little like NAS, if you will. Right now it's on sale for $130, so it's like $10 off. Honestly, not a bad case. So now for the power supply. Since we've gotten all of our components selected, we can actually use a power supply wattage calculator like this one provided by Newegg to actually kind of get an idea of what we are going to need for our entire system. Select AMD, Athlon 3000G, micro ITX board, no GPU. Let's go 8 gigabytes of RAM times 2. We're not going SSD, and then we have 2. Let's just overestimate because the hard drives we're getting are 5900 RPM. Actually, no, the WD-RAID I think are 5400 RPM. So we're going to have 2 of those. But we are going to spec for 5 because that's going to be the total that I'm going for down the road. So I don't want to have to like upgrade the power supply with that too. Selecting 5 drives, and then our total recommended PSU wattage is 176 watts. Now you can take that power supply wattage and search around for power supplies that are at least that rating, but I'm not familiar with anyone that makes like super low wattage power supplies like that. So in this case, I'm just going to go back to Newegg. I'm going to go back to searching through components, power supplies, I guess regular power supplies then. Let's just select the ATX power supply form factor because we need that. And let's select a few brands that we know we can trust, like Corsair, EVGA, Asus, Cooler Master. I guess you can do Antec as well. I know Seasonic's also a good one. I think I'm missing a few here. Definitely don't do Gigabyte. Wow, $600 power supply. We are not buying that one. So pretty much here we can kind of browse and we can kind of sort a little bit as well. Let's see, sort. Let's just do sort by lowest price. So we do have this Cooler Master one for $40, 550 watt, 80 plus white. So it's like the lower end on the efficiency ratings. We have an Antec 380 watt power supply. We have Antec 650 watt, 80 plus bronze power supply. Cooler Master 80 plus white for $80. It's looking like we would need to go for something like one of these Cooler Master ones for about $80 to $90, or spend up a little bit for one of the Corsair or the Asus ones. But the power supply that we are going to go with is the Seasonic GM 500 80 plus gold 500 watt semi-modular power supply. That was a mouthful. But because, while it does say $90 here and there were some cheaper ones here, I actually did get a notification from Newegg about a week ago on a sale on these that was going for $45. So I took advantage of that with some money for Christmas. I'll be factoring the sale price into the final price of the build, since my whole goal for this was to kind of like wait and try to find some sales on parts that I'm looking for. And this power supply, I just so happened to get a notification about it that was such a good deal, so took advantage of that one. Okay, so here's a spreadsheet I made with all the final components for the build, and honestly, it's not too bad of a build if I may say so myself. It's not going to be like a super, power-hungry beast of a machine, but it'll fit the use case of a NAS for storing videos on pretty nicely. Overall, with a total of $613, it's really not that bad, and that's including things like the on-raid license, which have to get later, the flash drive, which I already have, processor, which I already have, and the power supply, which I got for a Christmas present. So if you take out the things that I already have out, I'm just left with having to pay about $485 for the entire system. While I already have some of the hardware on hand, I'm also going to wait a little bit to see if I can find like the case and hard drive, for example, on a better deal. Because right now they are like $10 off or $5 off or whatever. But I think maybe around like Black Friday I can get a little more off, but we'll have to see. I'll wait on that one. Which, by the way, if you do like watching PC build videos, then get subscribed, because I'll be making a video about actually building and setting this thing up. I plan to build it a little bit after Christmas, so maybe a couple weeks afterwards. So, yeah. So there you have it. We've gone through and selected parts for a new NAS, albeit they were mostly pre-selected, but I hope I was able to explain my thought process well enough while selecting parts for targeting a specific use case. Like, yeah, it'd be cool to chuck like a 12900K, 128 gigs of RAM, and like an RTX 3080 in there just for lulz. But for those of us that don't have infinite money, it's much better to narrow down exactly what you need out of a system so you don't overspend on unnecessarily OP components and also waste a bunch of extra power, which is bad for the environment. And yeah, there's a reason you should try to get exactly what you need. Let's wrap it up. If you disliked the video, then you know what to do. But if you did like it, then go hit that like button and also get subscribed and hit the bell icon so you can keep up with my latest videos and show your support. I've also got a Discord server if you'd like to join the community and just chat and hang with us. And if you need help, then we're always glad to lend a hand. I hope you all have a great day, and I will catch you in the next one.